Hey everybody, welcome to Money's No Object. I'm your host, Dylan Howell. This is episode number 50, the big 5-0 of our YouTube channel and podcast. And I could not be more excited to continue sharing with you guys personal finance topics and things that I think are going to continue pushing you towards financial freedom long term. Today, we kind of expound on yesterday in today's video, and we talk about the do's and don'ts of emergency funds. So yesterday we talked about all the things that could go wrong and how emergency funds can help you cover them. Today we're just going to talk about, what to do, what not to do, why we should do it, why we shouldn't do it, and how emergency funds should work in our life. Something that's so simple. People can mess it up, and people mess it up every day. So we want to give you these do's and don'ts so that you don't fall into the wrong column of being responsible with your emergency fund versus being irresponsible and acting in an irrational way with that emergency fund. Before we get started though, if you could go down below, hit the big red subscribe button, like this video, leave me any feedback in the comments, questions, comments, whatever it may be, leave it down there. Also, if you're listening on Apple or Spotify podcasts, then make sure that you subscribe there, leave me a review, that'd be awesome. Also, follow me on social media at MNO with Dylan. I think I can add a lot of value to you. And it'll be much more visible. I mean, you don't have to go to YouTube or the podcast to see what I think. You can just scroll through your social media feed. And so I put a lot of good stuff there. Also, if you want to work one-on-one, if you want somebody to help you create a financial plan that works for you, then I can help you do that. Just go to my website, www.mnowithdylan.com. Go to the Work with Dylan tab and sign up for a financial coaching session there. Now, we're just going to jump right in today. We're just going to jump right into the things that are do's about emergency funds, as in do this. First one, get one. Get an emergency fund, okay? So this is a big thing. It's a big part of your financial success, okay? It's the only way long term that you can stay out of debt. Because if you have an emergency fund, then it's going to guard you against tragedy. It's going to guard you against all these reasons that you could possibly go into debt. And so I don't want to go into debt. And so it's the only way I'm going to stay out long term, because debt is not a way that we are going to build long term wealth. So it'll help me stay out of debt. Okay. And this is the only way that will keep you from going broke if something bad happens. Okay. So it's much more likely if you're having to go into debt for things, if bad things happen, you become much more likely to file for bankruptcy, all these types of things, if you don't have some kind of cash reserve that's going to help you cover things as they come along. Also, you will never be able to get on a strong financial footing consistently and invest if you fail to do this, if you fail to build an emergency fund, because of those reasons. You're going to keep going back into debt. You're going to keep going backwards in the financial action plan. You actually won't even be doing the financial action plan because I require that you have an emergency fund. And so you won't be doing that. And so when you fail to invest, when you fail to actually do the things that are going to help you get to strong financial positions, then it's going to be hard. It's going to be really, really hard for you to be financially successful. And then life without an emergency fund is just a vicious cycle. It's this vicious cycle of feeling like you're doing all right, and then something bad happening, then going into debt, paying the debt off, feeling like you're doing all right, something bad happened, and over and over and over again, because you don't have something that can just, bam, get rid of that particular emergency or tragedy right up front. Then another do to emergency funds is do it in order. Do your emergency fund in order as I have it in the financial action plan. Now, why is this important? Why shouldn't you just build an emergency fund? Why do I need to do it in your order, Dylan? Well, here's why. I've built this financial action plan for a reason. I built it in a way that's going to help you maximize your long-term financial success and financial freedom. Okay? You build a 1-month emergency fund at the beginning after you budget. Okay? Then you take your employer match if you have one and you invest in that. Then you get out of debt, right? In the fourth step, you get out of consumer debt, everything but your home, and then you jump into the 4 to 6 months of expenses in an emergency fund that is fully funded. Now, why is this necessary to do this in this way? Because if I do more than the 1 month of expenses and I'm trying to build this big emergency fund up front, then I'm taking money away that I could be paying off debt with, right? And I'd rather be out of debt than have this big pile of savings and this whole bunch of debt, okay? So there's that to start. So if you do it too early, that can be the case. If you do it any later, right, then maybe you've already bought a home, maybe you're already investing, maybe you're setting yourself up for things that could not be the best things for you financially. So the big one is buying a home without an emergency fund. So maybe you go about doing that and you don't have your emergency fund set up. Well, then you're kind of, stuck. If something bad happens, you can't take care of the things that you need to take care of. That's an issue. So that's why we put that thing right where it needs to be in the financial action plan to maximize your potential long term. Then put it in a high yield savings or money market account by itself. We would like it to make a little bit of interest, but with rates as low as they are right now, it's just not going to earn much. That's okay. We want it to be there and easily accessible, though. That's what we're worried about. We're worried about easy access, being able to get our hands on money when we need it. And the reason that I'm saying put it in a savings or money market account by itself is because I don't want my emergency fund in the same bucket, in the same account as my account that I'm paying bills out of, as I'm using that money to pay bills and buy things and whatever. And then I'll start to think that emergency fund can be used to buy things that I want to buy and, can incorporate that in. No, that emergency fund needs to be over by itself, not touched unless an emergency happens. Another due to emergency funds is grow it as your expenses grow. So I haven't talked a lot about this. I touched on it briefly yesterday. And what I mean here is that as you have more expenses, and pretty subsequently as you have more income, then what you're going to need is a bigger emergency fund. And so this can be done in a couple of different ways. So for instance, if you get a raise, or if you move into a more expensive home, or if you have bills that are higher than they were previously, or whatever, anytime your expenses are increasing and subsequently your income is increasing as well, then what you're going to need to do is either do a quick pause on where you are in the financial action plan and just real quick build up some cash that you can put into that financial action plan step of building the emergency fund. Or what you can do, and it's equally as good, is continue with what you're doing, and any extra cash you have, be piling that into the emergency fund until the emergency fund is funded to 4 to 6 months of expenses for where you are in life now. Because the problem is that 4 to 6 months of expenses for a 25-year-old that's newly married and is renting an apartment and all these types of things is far different than the 4 to 6 months of expenses for a 45-year-old in peak earning years with multiple kids, all those types of things. That's just going to be a different emergency fund, and it should be. So you have to make sure that you do that, especially if you built an emergency fund early. Make sure that you add to it either systematically in small amounts or later on in a big lump. Then another use it on emergencies. Like, don't be using it on crap, okay? So use it on emergencies. And I threw a little don't in there, don't use it on crap. We'll talk about that in a minute. But use it on emergencies. I talked about these emergencies yesterday. Lost job, car repairs, medical bills, home repairs, taxes, funeral expenses, all these types of things, right? These are the things that are emergencies. Use it on that, okay? Make sure that that is the thing that you are making the decision to dip into this big chunk of money that you've put away and go ahead and put that money on the table. That is what you need to be doing. I don't want to say do not, because that's a don't, but you do need to only use that money for emergencies. Then the last do that I have for you as far as emergency funds go is leave it alone. Leave your emergency fund money alone unless you do use it for an emergency. But otherwise, leave it alone. So I try to think of an emergency fund as if it doesn't exist. Like, it's not real money. It's not in my mind. I don't have it. It's somewhere else. I can't get it unless an emergency occurs. I think of it as if it's, only when an emergency occurs does that money even exist to me, right? So that's how you should think about it. You should think about that money is not for me to just do with what I wish. It's an emergency fund. It's for emergencies. Because what you want to do, you want to treat this money like it is insurance. And how do we treat insurance? Insurance costs money for protection, right? So if we're treating it like insurance, then we don't go and, try to take money out of our life insurance. No, we just pay for our life insurance, right? Just like you're going to have this emergency fund, you pay for that emergency fund. That's your emergency fund, right? And so you need to leave it alone. Let it be. Unless an emergency occurs, just let it be, leave it alone, and you'll be a lot better suited that way. We do want it to be easily accessible, but easily accessible in a way that when an emergency happens, I can get my hands on the money, not in a way where I can do things that are irresponsible with that money. So in essence, the recap of the do's for the emergency funds are: be smart, do the smart things, build one, use it for the right things. Make sure that you're, putting it in the right place, things like that. Those do's are 100% the, be smart version of the, emergency fund talk and the emergency fund conversation. But then you move to the don'ts, and the don'ts are negative. The don'ts are a little more powerful sometimes. But some people don't, listen to don'ts as well. They listen to do's. But the don'ts are going to don't be stupid. Don't do anything dumb. Don't do dumb stuff with your emergency fund. And so let's talk about those don'ts. Let's jump right into those. So I said, do get one. Don't go without one. Don't go without an emergency fund. And why do we not need to go without an emergency fund? So you need the protection from tragedy if something were to occur. And how can you do that other than having some type of cash reserve? And this is regardless of your income or net worth. It doesn't matter what your income or net worth is. You still need liquidity and you need cash to take care of bad things that happen in life that are costly. You don't want to go into debt or pull off of investments that are growing to pay for things that are going on in your life. You just don't want to have to do that. And your money requires some insurance. And there's no such insurance that will take care of your money in that way, that will cover these expenses that are unforeseen in that way. Therefore, the emergency fund will allow you to do so. You can use that emergency fund as if it is insurance. I told you earlier, do use it like it's insurance, right? Do act like it's not there and leave it alone. And so that's how you should be going about treating this emergency fund. But you cannot go without one. Do not go without an emergency fund. That's why the first thing you do after you budget is build a small one, because you need some kind of cushion in cash savings immediately. Don't number two, don't build your emergency fund up too high before you get out of debt. Okay? It is just absolutely dumb. Does not make any sense to me to have a bunch of cash and a bunch of debt, because it's a net worth game, right? Being rich, having wealth, is a net worth game. Okay? Well, if I have $15,000 in the bank and I owe $15,000 to the car company, what's my net worth? Zero. So they cancel each other. So why would you not just take the cash, put it on the thing that is costing you money every month, and then continue to build up the cash position? Of course you would want to do that. So you don't want to build it up too high until you're out of debt. That's why in the financial action plan, I call for you to work through it step by step. Get out of debt in step 4. Then move into step 5, where you can actually start building up your savings to 4 to 6 months of an emergency fund. There's a reason that it's like that. And it's like that so you're not doing something that is counterproductive. You're not doing something that is actually not doing you any good. It's not doing you any good to have savings but still have debt. You need to take some of that savings and pay that dang debt off. And that would be the more logical thing to do. So do not build it up too high before you're out of debt, because, once you're out of debt, then you can build up that nice cash pile. And man, it feels good to have that nice cash pile then. But while you're still in debt, that cash pile means nothing. That cash pile is just cash that you could be using to pay off your debt. Then not only do I not want you to build it up too high when you are still in debt, don't build it up too high, period. What do I mean, don't build it up too high, period? Don't you want us to have a big cash pile, Dylan? Don't you? Yes, but I qualify in the financial action plan how much I want you to have. I want you to have 4 to 6 months of expenses. Why? Why is it necessary that it's only 4 to 6 months and not any more than that? Because anything more than that, anything greater than that, is money you could be using to grow for you that you are not using to grow for you. It's money that you are foregoing the growth, you're foregoing the investment, the ability to grow that money forward for you just in order to build up some more cash in your emergency fund. And there's nothing wrong with having a big emergency fund, especially if you're a very wealthy individual. Having a big emergency fund may be absolutely necessary for you. I'm not saying that's not the case. But what I am saying is don't be so scared by life or so intimidated by the things that could go wrong. As I tried to tell you in yesterday's video, don't let all the things that could go wrong scare you into overdoing it, right? This is what I mean, overdoing it, building it up too high for no reason. You're not going to be able to insure yourself against everything. You're just not. Not everybody, everybody can't do that. Everybody can't build up the amount of money that you would need to insure against any bad thing happening. It's just not the case, and you shouldn't try. You should play the probabilities. You should look at the things that are possible to happen in a reasonable way and say, okay, those are the things that I want to be able to cover. And we covered those things, and we've talked about what those things are. And so I don't want you to be looking at, oh, I could get cancer and need this treatment and have to pay for these drugs and all this kind of stuff. Can those things happen? Absolutely, those things can happen. But if we go about trying to save for them and being irrational about what could happen, then we're going to struggle to build wealth, and we're going to struggle to be financially free in the long term because we're not going to have enough of our money actually growing for us. We're going to have too much of it just sitting in a savings account or sitting in a money market account. Even though I believe in the emergency fund, I do not believe in just having a bunch of money sitting in cash. I believe in having your money grow and compound for you, but it's a balance. It's something that you have to be able to realize, okay, that's enough. That I don't need any more than that. So don't overdo it. Don't build the pile up too high, period. Then another don't surrounding emergency funds. Don't invest it. You may say, well, Dylan, you just told me that you want your money to grow for you. You don't want too much in cash. What is it? I do not want too much in cash. And I do want you to grow your money. But there's a reason I put 4 to 6 months on the emergency fund, because anything more than that, then go take it and invest it and put it in a, retirement account or a taxable investment account, whatever, right? But don't put this in an investment account, because what this is going to do, it's going to make it more difficult to get your hands on it. And let's just say, let's say that you put your money in your emergency fund and your emergency fund was invested, and you put it all in the S&P 500 or whatever, right? And you thought, I can make a good rate of return. And long term, you can. I totally believe that. But let's say you did that in February, of this year. And then in March, the market drops 30, 35%. And then you lose your job. A lot of people did, by the way. A lot of people did lose their job. A lot of people are losing their jobs, right? So let's say then you lost your job. Well, then at that point, you need your emergency fund, and you only have 65% of it. So now you're lacking in the emergency fund that you do have, right? And you need it. So double whammy. And just to let you know, that's the way it typically happens, is the times when you need the emergency fund are the times when, in a macroeconomic sense, when things are really going wrong and there are job losses and things like that. The reason that there are job losses is a macroeconomic deal, and the markets aren't doing well. And so investing the money is foolish because you may need it in the short term. I've told you guys before, anything that you need to get your hands on in the next 5 years doesn't need to be invested, because it has a much higher likelihood of not being worth what it's worth just sitting in cash than something that you can invest for 5 years or more. And so I don't want you to get in that place where you're playing a game with the market and just saying, ooh, well, I'll put it in cash when the market goes up, or I'll do this when I don't want you to play that game. I want you to put this in. It's not an investment. Remember, it is insurance. It's insurance against tragedy, not an investment against tragedy. So I want you to be sure that that money is going to be there. And I want you to be sure that the money you need to get your hands on will be the money that you get your hands on. And then once you do, you can spend it on what you need to spend it on and then replenish it. I want you to invest your tail off, but I want you to invest your tail off after you've got this in a high yield savings or money market account. Period. End of story. Then another don't when it comes to your emergency funds, don't give it to the pizza man. And so what do I mean by don't give it to the pizza man? Well, emergency funds are for emergencies. And I said earlier, do spend them on emergencies. And I told you I said, don't spend them on stupid stuff. Well, this would be stupid stuff. This would be the things that you don't want to spend your emergency fund on. And so don't ever give this money to anybody or to any company or to anything for anything but an emergency situation. Okay. And your belly grumbling is not an emergency situation. Okay. So don't think that that is a reason to dip into this emergency fund. Not even if you plan to replenish it. That's something that a lot of people do, and I think that's wild. They'll go, "Oh, I'll just take this money from my emergency fund this month. I'll replenish it next month. No big deal, right?" Well, guess what? That doesn't happen. What happens is people go in and say, "I'm going to replenish it." And then guess what they do next month? They go in and they say, "I'm going to replenish the money." And then guess what they do the next month? And it's a cycle of doing the same thing over and over again. They don't ever make any traction because they're allowing themselves into this bad habit of dipping into their emergency fund or their savings for things that they don't need to be dipping into their savings for. And so it's a constant struggle if you are spending your emergency fund on stupid stuff. And it's probably one of the biggest battles that there is when it comes to emergency funds, because you don't want to spend it on things that don't mean something, and you don't want to waste this money. But far too many people, when they see money there, they just feel the need to spend it. I'm not one of those people, but I know there's a lot of them out there, and just don't allow yourself the temptation. Okay. Don't allow yourself the ability to do that. If that means putting your emergency fund at a different bank than your checking account, perfectly fine, right? As long as you can get your hands on it relatively quickly, I'm cool with that, right? Because anything that's going to create a little bit of friction for you, Mr. or Mrs. Spender, then that is who you are. That's what you need in place. And so I'm cool with that. Do what you have to do to put safeguards to where you don't touch this money, but you have to know that you can't spend it on stupid stuff. You have to know that you can't go shopping with it. Okay, that's not what it's there for. That money, like I told you earlier, leave it alone. You should act like it doesn't even exist. And so I know this is hard for some people because they're like, but it does exist and it is there and it's so easy to spend. And I get it, but you cannot allow yourself to spend it because this is such an important part of building a strong financial foundation. And if you're tearing that foundation down, you're not doing yourself any good. And then the last don't that I have for you is, don't think that your emergency fund either should be the same as a friend or should be just some round number. And so what do I mean by this? Well, everybody's emergency fund is different. And why is that? Because even if you've got the same income, everybody's got different expenses. Everybody has different financial situations that they are walking through in their life, or different, just life situations that could be costly, or different medical deals, or whatever it may be. Everybody's life is different. So everybody's emergency fund should also look different. So don't look at your friend that makes similar money to you and go, "Oh, well, they said their emergency fund is, $18,000, then that should probably be what ours is too." No, look at your own situation. And that's why budgeting is so important, because if I want to know what 1 month of expenses looks like for my household and then multiply that out or whatever, then I'm going to have to budget for my household. That's why I tell you at the beginning of the financial action plan, we have to be monthly budgeting. Every month, on the month, we are budgeting. And the reason that we do that is so we can know things like this. We can know how much 4 to 6 months of expenses is, because otherwise, how would you know, right? You probably would be trying to compare to a friend. And so we can't do that. We have to do something that is for ourselves and that works out for your particular situation. Okay. And then also the round number thing. The round number thing is actually a pretty big deal, right? A lot of people say, oh, just set aside 5,000 or 10,000 or 15,000 or whatever it is for emergencies. And they're naive as to what life can bring. Your life may require that you need more money in the emergency fund. You may have a variable income. You may, have a lot more ambiguity to your job or whatever. So you may require a higher emergency fund than someone else. And somebody else may have a very secure job and everything's cool and, don't have to worry about a loss of income and, no problems. Well, they may require a lower emergency fund. And this is all things equal. These could be the, same individuals, same income, same expenses, just different jobs that treat them differently. And one may need more of an emergency fund than the other. So it's just so individualized, and it should be. It should be something that you do for yourself, not something that you hear that somebody else did and just say, oh, well, that'll work. No, that's not what we need. We need a specific amount to your particular income and expenses, and I base it on expenses because expenses are, we have to use our income to cover our expenses anyway. So I want to know what our expenses are, and then 4 to 6 months, that's what we build it up to. Don't look at your friends. Again, it's the comparison game. It gets us in so much trouble financially. Don't allow it to here. So, hey, that's what this episode is. That's what this episode is all about. It is very straightforward. It's very to the point. It's do this, don't do this, because I want you to know. I want you to know with emergency funds how things need to go. I need you to know what the protocol is for an emergency fund, especially you all who have never had one or never saved for one. You need to know. And given that a lot of Americans don't have much saved, they can't cover a $400 expense, I'm going to guess a lot of you don't have a solid emergency fund. And that's okay, but we want to get you to a place where you do have that solid financial foundation that you've built yourself. And you need to know what that looks like before you get to the point where you're actually building it, or else you're liable to make some mistakes. And you just have to bear in mind that everybody's life is different. And, within those differences, we're going to have different situations and different outcomes and different that are just going to affect our lives so differently from one another. And that's going to impact our emergency funds. And so that's why I put this list together the way I did, the do's and don'ts, because, if you want to know how to go about something, you really need some kind of rule book. You need some kind of, not a legalistic thing. I wasn't trying to be, you have to do this, you can't do this, but I just want to be clear that if you want to be successful and build your good financial foundation and have an emergency fund and have money in case something goes wrong, then the best way that I have ever thought to do it is to do it in the way that I set out for you today. So no plan or emergency fund is going to be perfect, but we need these safeguards in place to be able to build wealth without the threat of some tragic issue turning into indebtedness and some kind of struggle that's just not necessary for your life. So hey guys, thanks for watching this video. If you could, go down below, hit the big red subscribe button, like this video, leave me any feedback in the comments if you have not already, and I'll be sure to get back to you there. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify podcasts, make sure that you subscribe, leave me a review if you can. Also, follow me on social media at MNO with Dylan. A lot of good stuff there. I think you guys really enjoy following me there. If you enjoy this show, you would definitely enjoy that as well. Also, if you need financial coaching help, if you need somebody to help you walk through a financial plan that is tailor-made for you, then we can work together. You just have to sign up through my website, and that is www.mnowithdylan.com. You can click on the Work with Dylan tab, and you can pick the type of financial coaching session that would work best for you there. So tune in Monday as I talk about how you should go about investing in something else that we have not talked about yet, and that is real estate. And so that'd be a really interesting topic. Also, be looking out tomorrow and Sunday for the MNO clips that I put out. If you haven't watched all the videos this week, that's fine. That would just allow you to get little pieces and see what the videos were about, and maybe you want to go back and watch them, and that can be motivation to do so. So check those little short clips out. 3 will come out on Saturday and then 2 on Sunday. So thank you guys for tuning into this episode and any of the first 50 episodes of Money's No Object. I am your host, Dylan Howell. God bless.